Everybody knows the story of the Titanic. There was a boat, there was some nude sketching, and two people definitely could have fit on that piece of wood. But not as many people know what happened after the iceberg dunked on the Titanic, and how New York City played a pivotal role in the story. I have a sinking feeling we're about to find out the history of New York's Titanic Gate.
Jack, I want you to draw me like one of your French girls.
When the Titanic left Queenstown, Ireland, its final destination was meant to be New York's Pier 59. Pier 59 is a part of Chelsea Piers, which historically refers to the area where luxury cruise liners would port in the early 20th century. Today it is, amongst other things, the site of a sports complex and a high-end photography studio. The Titanic met its untimely demise off the coast of Newfoundland on April 14, 1912. These massive ships were thought to be unsinkable at the time, and the crew was generally unprepared for such a disaster. The Titanic only had enough lifeboats to carry roughly half the passengers on board, and the crew also didn't know how many passengers could fit inside those lifeboats, so many of them were launched half full. Those who were not on the lifeboats, or like many third-class passengers, trapped in the lower decks as the ship sank, ended up in the lethally cold water. Only 13 of these passengers were rescued by lifeboats, even though there was additional room for over 500 of them. Around 4 a.m. April 15th, the RMS Carpathia responded to the Titanic's distress signals and rescued 710 passengers. Over 1,500 people perished in the accident. The Carpathia took 3 days to reach New York, delayed by heavy fog and tumultuous waters. The ship was, however, able to wire news of the disaster to the outside world, although many of the initial reports were confused or inaccurate. After making a brief stop at the Titanic's original destination, Pier 59, to drop off the lifeboats, the ship headed to New York's Pier 54. The disaster had sent the press into a frenzy, and many reporters bribed their way onto boats to try and be the first to get the passengers' stories. When the boat finally docked, there were over 40,000 New Yorkers waiting outside the pier. Today, Pier 54 remains vacant. Located at roughly 13th Street and the West Side Highway, you can still see the original archway gate. If you look closely enough, you can faintly see the words of both the Cunard and White Star lines whose ships once docked there. While there are no plans to build anything at Pier 54, it will be an entrance to the floating public park located at Pier 55 that's currently in development. The pier might have some bad energy though, as this was also the port where the Lusitania left from in 1915. Although many of the Titanic passengers who arrived at Pier 54 left New York, the ship has still made its mark on the city. For example, if you head to Battery Park, you'll find the Wireless Operators Memorial, which commemorates, wireless operators who have been lost at sea. Listed on this memorial is Jack Phillips, who worked tirelessly to send distress signals after the Titanic hit the iceberg. Not too far away in front of the South Street Seaport Museum is the city's main Titanic Memorial. Originally paid for by public donations in 1913, this lighthouse was first placed atop the Seamen's Church Institute of New York and New Jersey. The New Year's Eve type ball affixed to the top would be lowered at noon daily to mark the time for navigators. But it's not just monuments and memorials. Even New York's elite weren't unaffected by the disaster. Famous New York businessman John Jacob Astor went down with the Titanic and is the only victim to be buried in Manhattan. If you go to St. John the Divine in Morningside Heights, you can also find a stained glass window dedicated to Astor which depicts the sinking of the Titanic. One of the former owners of Macy's, Isidore Straus, also perished in the Titanic alongside his wife Ida. The story goes that when the ship was sinking, someone offered a lifeboat to the couple, but they refused because there were still women and children aboard. Isidore urged his wife to go without him, to which she reportedly said, "We have lived together for many years. Where you go, I go." They were last seen sitting on deck chairs as the water washed over them. Their deaths were rewritten in James Cameron's Titanic, where they are seen tucking each other into bed. Today, Straus Park commemorates the couple, located on 106th and Broadway. All of this barely begins to scratch the surface of New York's connection to the Titanic. The sinking of the Titanic was a tragedy that rocked the world and remains a culturally important event even to this day. Everywhere you go, you can find some connection to the event, especially in New York and Pier 54, where many passengers of the Titanic finally completed their journey.
Well, that's all I gotta say about that. Thanks so much for suffering through this video. If you liked it, feel free to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and if you didn't, I guess it's time for me to be moseying on down the line. All right, have a good one.